The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that orbited the blue giant star of Vexathari Prime. Inside, representatives from 48 different species sat in their designated seats, arranged in tiers that spoke clearly of power and influence. The highest seats belonged to the oldest and strongest civilizations. The lowest seats, barely above the chamber floor, held the newest members. Admiral Taeyang Kang sat in one of those low seats. His uniform was crisp and dark, decorated with the simple insignia of Earth's unified forces. Next to him sat Ambassador Hana Lee, her hands folded carefully on the datapad in her lap. Behind them, Captain Minho Park stood at attention, his face expressionless as he watched the proceedings. This was the Centennial Treaty renewal, held once every 100 standard years. Every species in the Galactic Council came to renegotiate their agreements, their trade routes, their territorial claims. For most species, it was a formality. Terms rarely changed much. Small adjustments here and there, minor disputes settled, and everyone went home satisfied. Humanity had joined the Council 30 years ago, after their first contact with an alien species had led to a series of careful diplomatic exchanges. Earth had been invited to join, and they had accepted with hope and enthusiasm. Finally, humanity would take its place among the stars. Finally, they would be part of something greater. The first 29 years had been difficult but manageable. Human ships traveled along assigned trade routes. Human colonies grew on worlds. The Council permitted them to settle. Human diplomats learned the complex web of galactic politics, the unspoken rules, the careful dances of favor and obligation. They were patient. They were respectful. They followed the rules. Now, in the 30th year, everything was about to change. The Vrex Primarch rose from his high seat, his forearms spread wide in a gesture that demanded attention. His species had ruled a quarter of the galaxy for 3,000 years, and he carried that authority in every movement. His translator device rendered his clicking speech into smooth, condescending words. "The Council recognizes the matter of the human territories," he announced. "After careful consideration by the senior members, we have prepared new terms for Earth's continued participation in galactic civilization." Hana leaned forward slightly. Her jaw tightened. This was not how renewals typically began. Usually, each species presented their own proposals first. The fact that terms had been prepared without human input was a very bad sign. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing the current map of human-controlled space. It was modest compared to the empires of older species, but it represented 30 years of hard work and careful expansion. First, the Primarch continued, human trade routes will be reduced by 70%. Your current lanes interfere with more efficient shipping corridors used by established species. You will be assigned alternative routes. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the upper tiers. Hana's knuckles went white as she gripped her datapad. Second, all human colonies beyond the Sol system will be placed under administrative oversight by council-appointed governors. This will ensure proper resource management and prevent the inefficiencies we have observed in human operations. Taeyang's expression did not change, but his hand moved slowly to rest on the armrest of his chair. His fingers drummed once, twice, 3 times. Behind them, Minho recognized the signal and remained perfectly still. Third, Earth's military fleet will be restricted to defensive vessels only. No dreadnoughts, no carriers, no ships capable of offensive operations beyond your home system. This is for your own protection, of course. The galaxy is dangerous, and you are simply not equipped to defend yourselves properly. A few species actually laughed at that. The sound echoed through the chamber, like mockery. Fourth, human settlements on resource-rich worlds, specifically the colonies at Kepler 442 and Tau Ceti, will be evacuated within 5 standard years. These worlds are better suited for development by species with more advanced extraction technology. Hana could not stay silent any longer. She stood, her voice clear and firm, despite the rage building inside her. Primarch. These terms violate existing treaties. The Charter of Galactic Unity guarantees each member species the right to self-determination, fair trade access, and territorial sovereignty. What you are proposing strips Earth of all three. The Primarch looked down at her from his high seat. His face, so alien, and yet somehow readable, showed pure contempt. Ambassador, the Charter applies to civilizations capable of contributing meaningfully to galactic society. In 30 years, what has humanity contributed? You have no unique technology. Your science is primitive. Your culture offers nothing we have not seen 1,000 times before. You are children playing with tools you barely understand. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a tone that somehow made his words cut deeper. These terms are generous. We are allowing you to remain in the council at all. You should be grateful. You should thank us. The chamber erupted in agreement. Species after species voiced their support. Some genuinely believed humans were inferior. Others simply saw an opportunity to claim human resources for themselves. A few remained silent, watching carefully, but none spoke in Earth's defense. The vote was called. It was over in minutes. 47 species voted in favor of the new terms. 0 voted against. One species, the mysterious Pelkari, who rarely spoke at all, chose to abstain. Their representative, a tall being wrapped in flowing robes, simply watched the humans with large, dark eyes. The Primarch smiled, showing far too many teeth. The human delegation has 72 standard hours to sign the new treaty. If you refuse, Earth will be expelled from the Council and subjected to complete economic blockade. No trade, no travel, no communication. You will be alone in the universe. Hana opened her mouth to respond, but Taeyang touched her arm gently. He stood, slowly, buttoned his uniform jacket, and looked up at the Primarch without fear or anger. His voice was calm, almost casual. We will convey your terms to Earth, he said simply. You will have our answer within 72 hours. They left the chamber in silence. The walk back to their ship felt endless. Hana was shaking with fury. Minho's fists were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. But Taeyang walked steadily, his face unreadable. Only when they were safely aboard the human flagship, the Indomitable, did Taeyang finally speak. He turned to Minho and said 4 words that would change everything. Send Protocol Jericho. All channels. Minho's eyes widened slightly. Sir, are you certain? Taeyang nodded once. They have made their choice. Now we make ours. Within minutes, encrypted messages began streaming from the Indomitable to every corner of human space. Messages that had been prepared years ago, waiting for this exact moment. Messages that would wake up systems and activate people who had been sleeping in the shadows for decades. The countdown had begun. The galaxy would never be the same. Director Yuna Choi sat in a windowless room deep beneath the surface of Earth, 3 kilometers under the Pacific Ocean. The room had no official name and did not appear on any map. Only 17 people in the entire solar system knew it existed. Around her, dozens of screens displayed information streaming in from across human space. She watched as the last confirmation arrived. Every human colony had received the message. Every ship had acknowledged. Every agent had been activated. She touched her earpiece and spoke softly. All stations report ready. We are dark in 30 seconds. Across human space, something unprecedented happened. Every Ansible connection to the galactic network shut down simultaneously. Every human diplomatic channel went silent. Every trade ship that was currently traveling alien space suddenly changed course, burning hard toward the nearest human-controlled system. Colony governors enacted emergency protocols, severing all communication with non-human vessels and stations. Within 24 hours of the Council vote, humanity simply vanished from galactic civilization, At first, the council was pleased. They interpreted the silence as submission. The Vrex Primarch gave a speech about how humans had learned their place. The Thren Collective, a species of calculating traders who controlled much of the galaxy's commerce, immediately began dividing up the trade routes that humanity had abandoned. Various species started making plans for which human colonies they would claim once the 72-hour deadline passed. But as days became weeks, unease began to grow. The Thren sent 3 scout ships to Sol System to check on the status of Earth's surrender. The ships jumped into the system and immediately activated their long-range scanners. They found nothing. Not just no response to their hails, but nothing at all. Where Earth's orbital stations should have been, there was only empty space. Where human ships should have been patrolling, there was silence. The entire inner solar system was wrapped in some kind of sensor-dampening field that made detailed scans impossible. The Thren captain sent a ship closer to investigate. It crossed an invisible line somewhere near Jupiter's orbit and simply stopped transmitting. No explosion. No distress signal. Just sudden silence. The captain, now frightened, sent his second ship. Same result. He turned his own ship around and jumped back to Thren space to report. But something went wrong with his jump drive. His ship arrived at the coordinates, but 3 weeks late, and with his entire crew unconscious. When they woke, none of them could remember what had happened in the Sol system. The council sent more ships. Military vessels this time. Heavily armed, and prepared for anything. 6 different species contributed ships to the task force. 40 vessels in total jumped to Sol system together, maintaining tight formation for safety. None of them came back. In the council chamber, panic began to replace confidence. What had happened to those ships? Had Earth somehow developed weapons that could destroy 40 warships without any of them getting off a distress signal? That seemed impossible. Humanity's technology was inferior. Everyone knew that. Everyone had seen the reports. What they had not seen was happening in 100 secret locations across human space. Dr. Junho Han stood in a research facility built into an asteroid in a system that had no official name or designation. Around him, engineers and scientists worked at stations filled with equipment that would have shocked any alien observer. The technology was not primitive. It was not inferior. In many ways, it was beyond what the Galactic Council possessed. Junho pulled up a holographic display and reviewed the data one more time. For 30 years, every single human ship that had traveled to alien space had been equipped with hidden scanners. Every human diplomat had carried recording devices that looked like simple accessories. Every human trader had been trained to observe and report. For 30 years, humanity had been mapping the galaxy's military installations, shipyards, resource depots, and command centers with meticulous detail. More than that, they had been studying every piece of alien technology that humans could acquire through legal trade had been taken apart, analyzed, and reverse engineered. Human scientists did not just copy alien designs. They improved them. They found weaknesses. They discovered inefficiencies that species who had used the same technology for thousands of years had never questioned. The galaxy thought humanity was primitive because humans asked a lot of questions. They thought humans were weak because humans preferred diplomacy to force. What they failed to understand was that questions were how humans learned, and diplomacy was how they bought time. Director Choi wants an update. An assistant called out to Junho. He nodded and opened a secure channel. Yuna's face appeared on his screen, her expression calm but intense. "How are the weapons?" she asked. "Ready," Junho replied. "All 17 types. The quantum torpedoes exceed projections by 40%. The Nova cannons are stable. The electronic warfare suite can crack any known alien encryption in under 3 seconds. And the gravity drives for the fighters are performing perfectly. HPC. And the Ghost Fleet?" Junho smiled slightly. "Fleet Admiral Hyun reports all ships are ready and waiting." The aliens have no idea. We have 3 times the ships we've shown them. The construction yards in the Oort cloud have been operating for 28 years without detection. Yuna nodded slowly. Good. Because in 48 hours, we make them understand what humanity really is. Halfway across the galaxy, Commander Salmon Bake sat in a small apartment on a Vrex colony world. She had lived here for 7 years, working as a shipping administrator. Her neighbors knew her as a quiet woman who kept to herself. They had no idea that she was one of Director Yuna's deepest cover agents, one of 37 humans who had embedded themselves into alien governments and corporations. Her apartment's walls looked normal, but hidden behind a false panel was communication equipment that would have gotten her executed if discovered. She checked the encrypted message that had just arrived. It was simple. 1 word. Reckoning. Salmon took a slow breath. 7 years of waiting were about to end. She pulled out the equipment and began her work. Within hours, she had compiled detailed reports on every military installation within 50 light-years of her position. Troop movements, supply chains, command structures, security protocols, everything. She was not alone. Across the galaxy, 36 other agents did the same thing. They had been waiting for years, living normal lives, building trust, gaining access. Now they activated, and the information they provided would make the difference between victory and catastrophe. Back on Earth, Admiral Taeyang stood in a command center that had been built specifically for this moment. Screens showed the positions of human forces across known space. He watched as the Ghost Fleet moved into position, their stealth systems keeping them invisible to alien sensors. Ambassador Hana stood beside him. She had not slept in 3 days. "Are we really going to do this?" she asked quietly. "Once we start, there is no going back." Taeyang looked at her with tired eyes. "They gave us no choice. We tried peace. We tried negotiation. We followed their rules for 30 years, and they still treated us like slaves. Sometimes the only way to make people see you as equal is to prove you cannot be conquered. We could be starting a war that destroys everything." "No," Taeyang said firmly. "We are ending a war that they started when they decided we did not deserve basic rights. What comes next is up to them. If they choose wisdom, we will have peace. If they choose pride, we will have war. But either way, we will have our freedom." Hana was quiet for a long moment. Then, nodded. Taeyang turned to his communication officer. "Send the order. All ships, all agents, all platforms. Operation Reckoning begins in 1 hour. Synchronized strikes on all primary targets. No warnings. No mercy for those who resist. But any who surrender will be treated fairly." "HE," the officer hesitated. "Sir, Fleet Admiral Hyun is asking if you want to make a statement before we begin." Taeyang shook his head. "No statements. They have had 30 years of our words. Now they will see our actions. When we are done, then we will talk." Across human space, ships that had been hiding for decades uncloaked. Weapons that had been built in secret powered up. Agents prepared to execute plans they had memorized years ago. And on Earth, in homes and cities and space stations, ordinary people watched their screens and waited to see if their civilization would survive what came next. The galaxy had scorned Earth. Now Earth would show them what scorn earned. At exactly 0300 Galactic Standard Time, 17 different star systems experienced the same impossible event. Space simply tore open, and through the tears came ships unlike anything the galaxy had seen in living memory. The Ghost Fleet had arrived. Fleet Admiral Hyun Chae stood on the bridge of the Revelation, the flagship of a fleet that officially did not exist. Around her vessel, 60 massive warships hung in space, their angular hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. They had been built over 28 years in hidden shipyards scattered through the Oort cloud, constructed with materials that had been quietly diverted from official projects and mining operations that no auditor had ever checked too carefully. All ships report ready, her tactical officer announced. Targets locked. Waiting for your order, Admiral. Hyun looked at the display showing the Vrex shipyards at Vexrel, the largest military construction facility in this sector of the galaxy. Hundreds of Vrex warships were docked there, being built or repaired. Thousands of workers moved through the massive structure. It was a symbol of Vreek's power, supposedly impregnable, protected by defensive platforms and shields that could withstand anything. The Vrex had been so certain of their superiority that they had never considered they might need to defend against humanity. Fire. The quantum torpedoes were a human innovation, based on alien technology, but pushed far beyond what any other species had achieved. They did not simply explode. They briefly created a controlled quantum field that caused matter to become unstable at the molecular level. The effect lasted only microseconds. But that was enough. 20 torpedoes struck the Vrex shipyard's shields. The shields held for exactly 3 seconds before the quantum fields caused the shield generators themselves to tear apart from the inside. The next wave of torpedoes hit the shipyards directly. What followed was not an explosion. It was disintegration. Massive sections of the stations simply came apart, the molecular bonds holding them together failing all at once. Ships still in their berths broke into pieces. Construction equipment became clouds of debris. And then, mercifully, the torpedoes' effects ended, and secondary explosions began as fuel and ammunition detonated conventionally. Across the galaxy, 16 other strikes happened at the same instant. The Thren Ansible hub that controlled communication for half the known species suddenly went dark, captured by human marines who had been hiding in cargo shipments for weeks. The Korval fortress world found itself surrounded by human dreadnoughts that blocked all traffic in or out. Mining operations on a dozen worlds were hit by precision strikes that destroyed equipment but left the workers unharmed. But humanity did not stop at military targets. On the Vrex capital world, Agent Daewon Kim sat in an office where he had worked for 15 years as a mid-level bureaucrat in the Vrex diplomatic corps. His cover had been perfect. He was boring, reliable, and forgettable. He filed reports on time, never caused problems, and attended office parties where he made small talk and was promptly forgotten. What none of his colleagues knew was that his position gave him access to the Vrex diplomatic communication network. For 15 years, he had been quietly copying every message that passed through, every secret negotiation, every private comment, every plan and scheme and betrayal. Now, following the orders that had finally come, Daewon took all of that data and broadcast it on every galactic channel he could access. The results were devastating. The galaxy learned that the Vrex Primarch had been secretly planning to dominate the entire council, viewing every other species as inferior and worthy only of being controlled. They learned that the Vrex had been manipulating trade prices for decades, causing artificial shortages to drive up profits. They learned about secret weapons programs, about plans to assassinate troublesome council members, about contempt so deep that the Primarch had once joked about sterilizing entire species. Within 6 hours, 3 Vrex subject species had declared independence and were openly rebelling. Within 12 hours, the Vrex diplomatic corps was in chaos. The Primarch himself had fled the capital, his location unknown, his government fracturing around him. Daewon watched the chaos he had unleashed and felt no satisfaction, only grim necessity. He had lived among the Vrex for 15 years. Some of them had been kind to him. Some had been genuine in their friendship. But he had known from the beginning that this moment would come, and he had prepared himself for it. He gathered his personal belongings, which were few, and left the building. His mission was complete. If he was lucky, he would make it to the extraction point, where a human ship would pick him up. If not, at least his work was done. Halfway across the galaxy, Lieutenant Unji Song flew a fighter that should not have been possible. It was small, barely larger than a ground vehicle, but it moved through space with impossible speed and agility. The secret was the gravity drive, a human innovation that manipulated gravity fields, instead of relying on conventional thrust. The result was acceleration that would have killed an unprotected pilot, and maneuverability that made the fighter almost impossible to target. Unji led a squadron of 12 such fighters against a Thren war fleet that was moving to reinforce their besieged Ansible hub. The Thren fleet consisted of 23 capital ships, each one massive and powerful. By any conventional military thinking, 12 fighters should not have been able to even scratch such a fleet. But these were not conventional fighters, and human military thinking had been forged in centuries of warfare on Earth before humanity had ever met an alien species. The fighters came in fast, far faster than the Thren ships could track. They wove between capital ships, dodging fire that always arrived where they had been, rather than where they were, and they carried weapons specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in alien shield technology. "Target the shield generators," Yunji ordered. "Just like we practiced. Hit and move. Never stay still." Her fighter screamed past a Thren cruiser, releasing a spread of micromissiles that locked onto the ship's shield emitters. The missiles were tiny, but they did not need to be large. They just needed to hit the right spots. Explosions blossomed across the cruiser's hull as its shields flickered and died. Behind her, the rest of her squadron executed the same maneuver on other ships. Within minutes, 8 Thren capital ships were dead in space, their shields down and their hulls breached. The remaining 15 ships tried to retreat, but human destroyers were already jumping into the system to cut off their escape. "All fighters, break off and return to carrier," Unji commanded. "Let the big ships finish this." As she flew back toward the human carrier that had launched her squadron, Unji felt a strange mixture of emotions. She had just helped cripple a major alien fleet. She had probably killed hundreds, maybe thousands of beings. But she also knew that every Thren ship she disabled was one less ship that could be used to enforce the unfair treaties that had bound humanity for 30 years. War was terrible, but slavery was worse. Admiral Taeyang watched the reports flowing in from across the galaxy. Every strike had succeeded beyond expectations. The aliens had been completely unprepared for the scale and sophistication of the human attack. Their military doctrine had not changed in centuries. They had become comfortable, complacent, certain of their superiority. "Open a channel," he ordered. "All frequencies. I want every species in the galaxy to hear this." His communication officer worked quickly. "Channel open. Admiral, you are broadcasting to approximately 94 billion individuals across the galactic network." Taeyang stood straight, his uniform perfect, his face calm but his eyes hard as steel. When he spoke, his voice was clear and firm. "I am Admiral Taeyang Kong of Earth. For 30 years, humanity has been a member of the Galactic Council. For 30 years, we have followed your rules, respected your customs. 3 days ago, the Council voted to strip Earth of its rights, its territory, and its freedom. They gave us an ultimatum: submit or be destroyed." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We have chosen a third option. Every treaty that bound humanity is now void. Every restriction placed upon us is ended. Every slight, every humiliation, every act of contempt, we remember all of it. We did not want this conflict. We wanted equality. But since you would not grant us equality through law, we will take it through strength." His expression hardened. "To those species who voted to enslave us, know that we will not forget. To those who stood silent while injustice was done, know that silence makes you complicit. But to any species willing to negotiate new terms based on actual fairness and mutual respect, we are ready to talk. You have 48 hours to decide which path you will take. Choose wisely. Thanks for watching. We can see this is 5. We will not ask twice." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings tried to process what they had just witnessed. Humanity, the species everyone had dismissed as primitive and weak, had just struck everywhere at once with precision and power that shocked even the oldest civilizations. The Council would never be the same. The question now was whether it would survive at all. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 12 hours after Admiral Taeyong's broadcast. The chamber felt different now. The Vrex Primarch's seat was empty. He had disappeared, and the remnants of his government were too busy fighting internal rebellions to send a replacement. The Thren representative sat in custody, arrested by his own military for corruption, after the leaked documents revealed his involvement in numerous illegal schemes. Fear hung in the air like smoke. The Corval ambassador, a being whose species had ruled their empire for 6,000 years, spoke first. His voice was filled with rage barely contained. This is an act of war. Humanity has attacked military installations, killed thousands, and destabilized the entire galactic order. We must respond with overwhelming force. We must show them that such aggression will not be tolerated. Murmurs of agreement came from 13 other species. They were the hardliners. The ones who believed that military might was the only thing that mattered. The ones who saw humanity's actions as an unforgivable challenge to their authority. But 22 other species remained silent or spoke cautiously. They had seen what humanity could do. They had seen ships vanish, installations destroyed, and the mighty Vrex brought to their knees in a single night. They were pragmatists. And pragmatists knew when to reconsider their position. The Pelkari observer, who had abstained from the original vote, spoke for the first time in decades. His voice was soft but carried clearly through the chamber. Perhaps we should ask ourselves why humanity felt such action was necessary. Perhaps we should acknowledge that the terms we imposed were unjust. Unjust? The Corval ambassador snarled. They are primitives. Children. They have no right to question the decisions of civilizations that have existed for millennia, and yet these children have bloodied the nose of those ancient civilizations quite effectively, the Pelkari replied calmly. Perhaps we have underestimated them, or perhaps we have simply grown arrogant. In our age, the debate raged for hours, but no consensus emerged. Finally, the council split into factions. 14 species declared themselves the Hardliner Coalition and announced they would send a combined fleet to Sol system to force humanity's surrender. 22 species urged caution and called for new negotiations. 11 species refused to commit to either side, watching and waiting to see which way the wind would blow. The Hardliner Coalition assembled their fleet at a neutral staging point. 314 warships from 14 different species, representing thousands of years of military tradition and experience. They were confident. Humanity had gotten lucky with surprise attacks, but in a direct confrontation, numbers and experience would prevail. Fleet Admiral Hyun received word of the approaching fleet when it was still 3 days from Sol system. She had been expecting this. The hardliners were predictable. They could not allow humanity's defiance to go unanswered, because if they did, every other species they had bullied over the centuries might get the same ideas. Recall the Ghost Fleet to Sol system, she ordered. Activate the fortress platforms and send a message to the incoming fleet. Warn them once. After that, we let the defenses speak for themselves. The message was simple and direct. You are approaching human sovereign space. Turn back now. This is your only warning. The Hardliner Coalition fleet ignored the warning. They jumped into Sol system in force, their sensors sweeping space for the human fleet they expected to find waiting for them. They found 60 human warships arranged in a defensive formation near Mars orbit, 60 against 314. The coalition commander allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This would be over quickly. Then his sensors registered something new. Massive structures were uncloaking throughout the system, appearing from the Oort cloud where they had been hiding for decades. Fortress platforms, each one the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that made any normal warship look like a toy. What in the void are those? The coalition commander whispered. He got his answer when the platforms opened fire. The Nova cannons had been designed specifically to counter large fleet formations. They fired projectiles accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed using gravity manipulation technology. When those projectiles hit their targets, the kinetic energy release was comparable to a small nuclear explosion, and the platforms were firing dozens of them every second. The first volley turned 16 coalition ships into expanding clouds of debris before their crews even realized they were being fired upon. The second volley took out 23 more. The third volley never got a chance to fire because the coalition ships were already breaking formation, scrambling to retreat. But the human ships were not content to let them run. Admiral Hyun had planned for this carefully. Human destroyers jumped in behind the coalition fleet, cutting off their escape routes. Then, the electronic warfare began. Human ships broadcast signals that infiltrated alien communication networks, spreading false orders and causing confusion. They deployed swarms of drones that mimicked the signatures of real warships, making it impossible for alien sensors to tell what was real and what was fake. They used jammers that disrupted targeting systems and navigation computers. The battle turned into chaos. Coalition ships fired at false targets, while real human vessels slipped through their formations. Captains received contradictory orders and did not know which were genuine. Some ships tried to retreat only to collide with their own allies. Others accidentally targeted friendlies in the confusion. And through it all, the fortress platforms kept firing with mechanical precision. 3 hours after entering Sol System, the coalition commander sent a desperate transmission on all channels. "We surrender. Stop firing. We surrender. We surrender." The human guns went silent. Admiral Hyun's voice came through clearly. "All coalition vessels will power down weapons and engines. You will be escorted out of Sol System under guard. Any ship that deviates from our designated route will be destroyed. Any ship that reactivates weapons will be destroyed. You came here to make us submit. Instead, you have submitted. Remember that lesson." The battered coalition fleet, now reduced to 187 functional ships, limped out of Sol System under human escort. Behind them, the fortress platforms cloaked again, vanishing back into darkness, waiting for the next foolish enemy. While the battle raged at Sol, Captain Jisoo Ryu traveled alone in a small diplomatic vessel to meet with the Pelcari observer. The meeting took place at a neutral location, a small station orbiting a white dwarf star, far from any inhabited system. The Pelcari, whose name Jisoo learned was San, greeted her with a gesture of respect. They sat in a simple room, with a window showing the glowing corpse of the star outside. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Jisoo said carefully. "Your abstention at the council vote was noted. We would like to understand why." San was quiet for a long moment before responding. "My species has been part of the council for 10,000 years. In that time, we have seen 37 different civilizations try to dominate the others. Some succeeded for a time. All eventually failed. The galaxy has a way of humbling the arrogant." "Trime. And you think humanity will be humbled too?" "No," San said softly. "You are different. The others wanted domination. They wanted to rule. You simply want to be treated fairly. That makes you far more dangerous to the old order." Jisoo felt a chill at those words. Dangerous how? Because fairness is harder to fight than conquest. A conqueror can be opposed, but a victim demanding justice? That creates moral complications. Already, 17 species have contacted my government privately. They are tired of the old system. They see what humanity has done, and they wonder if they too could resist the ancient powers. You have given hope to the oppressed. And that is the most dangerous thing of all. San leaned forward. My species and 17 others wish to propose an alliance. Not to help you conquer. Not to help you dominate. But to rebuild the council into something better. Something actually fair. Jisoo felt her heart race. This was more than they had hoped for. What would you ask in return? Nothing. San said simply. We are tired of the game. We have played it for 10,000 years, and we are weary. Help us build something new. That is all we ask. On the other side of the galaxy, General Minji O led a ground operation that would shift galactic opinion more than any battle. Intelligence had discovered 4 worlds where pre-spaceflight civilizations were being secretly enslaved by species who officially claimed the worlds were uninhabited. Human Marines landed on those worlds and liberated them. They provided evidence of the crimes. They rescued beings who had been taken from their homes and forced into labor. And they broadcast everything on every galactic channel they could access. The images of freed slaves, of hidden facilities, of the sheer scale of the crime, shocked billions of beings across the galaxy. Species who had remained neutral in the conflict suddenly found themselves horrified by what the old council had allowed to happen. Public opinion shifted like an earthquake. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds. Council representatives found themselves facing angry crowds demanding answers. How long had this been going on? Who had known? Who had profited? Ambassador Hana watched the news feeds from Earth and allowed herself a small smile. The military strikes had gotten the galaxy's attention. But the moral case would win its heart. Humanity was not just strong. They were right. And that combination was unstoppable. The council that had scorned Earth was tearing itself apart. Now came the hard part. Building something better from the ruins. 3 months after the Night of Broken Chains, Ambassador Hana Lee walked through the corridors of the rebuilt council chamber. It looked different now. The tiered seating arrangement that had spoken so clearly of hierarchy and power was gone. In its place was a circular design, where every seat was at the same level, facing toward the center. No one sat above anyone else. 41 species had agreed to attend this reconvened session. 6 had refused, choosing instead to isolate themselves in their own territories. The Vreks were not among the attendees. Their empire had collapsed into civil war and would not recover for years. The Corval had sent a representative, but only to observe. They had made it clear they rejected everything this new council stood for. Admiral Taeyang stood at the center of the chamber. He wore his uniform, but he also carried a datapad containing the document that would define the next era of galactic civilization. Around him, representatives from dozens of species watched and waited. Some were hopeful. Some were skeptical. Some were still angry about what humanity had done. Taeyang began to speak, his voice calm and measured. 3 months ago, I stood in this chamber and was told that humanity had contributed nothing to galactic civilization. I was told we were children playing with tools we did not understand. I was told we should be grateful for the opportunity to exist at the galaxy's mercy. He paused, looking around the circle of faces, human and alien alike. You scorned Earth. You mocked our contributions. You thought us weak because we sought peace first and carried weapons second. You forgot the most important lesson that any civilization should learn. Peace is only possible when those who seek it are strong enough to enforce it. Some representatives shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded in agreement. We did not want war. Taeyang continued. We never wanted war. We wanted fairness. Fair trade. Fair treatment. Fair representation. We wanted to be partners, not subjects. But you would not grant us that through law and negotiation. So, we took it through strength. He held up the datapad. This document is called the New Charter. It was written with input from 32 different species, including the Pelkari, whose wisdom spans 10,000 years. It contains the rules by which we propose to rebuild galactic civilization. I will now read its core principles. The chamber fell silent. First, equal voting rights for all member species, regardless of size, age, or military power. 1 species, 1 vote. No tiers, no hierarchy. Decisions are made by majority, with a requirement for 60% approval on matters of war or territorial changes. Several of the older species looked uncomfortable at that, but none spoke against it yet. Second, mandatory independent audits of all trade agreements and treaties. If a treaty is found to unfairly benefit one party over another, it will be renegotiated or dissolved. No more hidden exploitation. No more economic slavery disguised as trade. The few surviving Thren representatives looked particularly unhappy, but again, no one objected aloud. Third, absolute protection for pre-spaceflight civilizations. Any species found interfering with such civilizations will face immediate expulsion and sanctions. We have seen what happens when the strong prey on the weak. It ends now. This drew the first murmurs of approval from many species in the chamber. Fourth, mutual defense pacts that actually function. If a member species is attacked, all members respond. No exceptions, no excuses. An attack on one is an attack on all. But equally, if a member species initiates aggression, they face the combined opposition of all other members. Peace through collective security. More nods of agreement. The galaxy had spent too long watching powers fight each other, while everyone else suffered the consequences. Fifth, free trade zones without exploitative restrictions. Species can trade with whoever they wish, on whatever terms they mutually agree to. No more forcing weaker species to accept unfair deals or face isolation. And finally, Taeyang said, his voice growing harder, a council military that answers to all members collectively, not just to the powerful. A force dedicated to protecting the weak, enforcing the rules, and ensuring that no single species can dominate the others through military might. He lowered the data pad and looked around the chamber. These are the principles. The full document contains the detailed implementation, all of which is open for debate and refinement. But these core principles are not negotiable. If you cannot accept equality, fairness, and justice as the foundation of galactic civilization, then you do not belong in this council. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the Pelkari observer, San, rose from his seat. The Pelkari accept these principles and vote in favor of the new charter, he said clearly. One by one, other species stood to voice their support. Some, enthusiastically, seeing this as the change they had wanted for centuries, others reluctantly, recognizing that the old order was dead and this new one offered the best path forward. A few remained seated, undecided, watching to see how the vote would go. When the count was finished, 38 species had voted in favor, 2 had abstained, and 1, the Korval representative, had voted against. The Korval rose slowly, his ancient face twisted with contempt. You have destroyed something that stood for millennia. You will regret this. All of you. When the chaos comes, when the order breaks down, when species war with each other without the strong to maintain discipline, you will wish for the old ways. And by then, it will be too late. He walked out of the chamber. No one tried to stop him. Taeyang watched him go, and then spoke again. He may be right. This new system may fail. Building something is always harder than destroying it. But I would rather die trying to create something fair than live comfortably in a system built on injustice. Humanity learned that lesson on Earth long ago. Now, we offer that lesson to the galaxy. On Earth, Dr. Junho Han sat in his lab watching the broadcast. Director Yuna Choi stood beside him, her face thoughtful. Do you think they understand? Junho asked. Do they understand that we did not do this because we wanted war? That we did it because it was the only language they would hear? Yuna shrugged. Some do. Some never will. But it does not matter what they understand. What matters is what they do now. The old council is dead. What grows from its ashes will define the next 1,000 years. She turned to look at Junho. Deactivate the weapons programs. Start converting the military research to civilian applications. And contact the other species' scientific communities. Now that we are equals, we can actually share knowledge properly. Real cooperation, not the scraps they used to throw us. Junho smiled. That will take years. Decades even. Good. Yuna said. Let it take decades. Let it take centuries. We have time now. Time we bought with strength, to be used for building something better. In orbit around Earth, Commander Salmon Bake stood on the bridge of a Ghost Fleet vessel as it slowly uncloaked. All across the solar system, the secret fleet was revealing itself. Ship by ship, the time for hiding was over. "Transmit our full specifications to the Council," she ordered. "Let them see exactly what we built. Let them know that we can always reach for these weapons again, if we need to. But also let them know that we would prefer never to fire them in anger again." The ships appeared on galactic sensors like ghosts becoming solid. 3 times the size of the public fleet. Weapons beyond what most species possessed. 3. Con. The full extent of humanity's military power, no longer hidden. Serving now as a reminder and a promise. We can protect ourselves. Do not make us prove it again. Lieutenant Unji Song flew her fighter through a trade lane that had once been closed to humans. Now, ships from a dozen different species traveled together peacefully, protected by a joint council patrol. She watched them pass and felt something strange. Hope, maybe. Or just the absence of fear. Captain Minho Park commanded the Indomitable on a joint patrol with Pelkari vessels. The 2 crews were learning to work together, sharing tactics and techniques. It was awkward at first, but both sides were trying. That was new. That was worth protecting. Agent Daewon Kim sat in a shuttle heading back to Earth. He had been extracted successfully after his mission was complete, though not without difficulty. He had spent 15 years living a lie among the Vreks. Now he was going home to a world he barely remembered. He did not know what he would do next. Maybe nothing. Maybe rest. He had earned it. Ambassador Hana stood at the window of the new council building, watching ships arrive and depart. So many species, coming together to try something that had never quite worked before. Equals working together instead of the strong dominating the weak. Admiral Taeyang joined her at the window. "Do you think it will last?" she asked him. He was quiet for a moment before answering. "It will last as long as we are willing to defend it. They scorned Earth once. They learned from that mistake. But there will be other challenges, other species who think they can dominate. Other moments when we will have to choose between peace and justice. And if we have to choose, then we choose justice," Taeyang said firmly. "Because peace without justice is just slow slavery. We proved that we have strength. Now we prove that we have wisdom, that we can build as well as we can destroy, that we can lead without dominating." Hana smiled slightly. "No pressure then. None at all," Taeyang agreed with the ghost of a smile. They stood together and watched the ships move through space. Human ships traveling alongside alien vessels, all protected by the same laws, all bound by the same rules, all equal under the new charter. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better. And better was worth fighting for. Earth hung in space below them, blue and beautiful and peaceful. The planet that had been scorned was now the cornerstone of a new galactic order, not through conquest, not through domination, but through the simple, terrible, necessary proof that humanity would never be subjugated again. The old council had made one critical mistake. They had thought strength and wisdom were opposites. They had thought that a species that valued peace must be weak. They had thought that kindness was the same as submission. Humanity had taught them otherwise. Strength without wisdom was tyranny. But wisdom without strength was just a plea for mercy. The galaxy needed both. And now, finally, it had a chance to build something that balanced both. Whether that chance would be taken, whether the new charter would succeed where the old council had failed, only time would tell. But for the first time in 30 years, Ambassador Hana felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Real, genuine hope that the future might be better than the past. And as she stood there watching ships from across the galaxy move peacefully through space, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had changed something important, that maybe the galaxy would remember this moment. The moment when Earth refused to be scorned. The moment when humanity said no. The moment when the weak became strong and used that strength not for revenge, but for justice. The moment when everything changed.